The salty kiss of the Oakhaven air was the first thing Elara noticed each morning, even before her eyes had fully adjusted to the soft gray light filtering through her bedroom window. It was a crisp, invigorating scent, a blend of sea spray, briny seaweed, and the distant, comforting tang of wood smoke from the town's chimneys. She'd always been a creature of quiet habits, and Oakhaven, with its gentle rhythm and ancient charm, had embraced her exactly as she was. She'd arrived in late autumn, trading the relentless rush of city life for the promise of coastal tranquility. Her small cottage, nestled just a few blocks from the harbor, was a symphony of weathered stone and climbing roses, their last defiant blooms clinging to the trellises like hopeful secrets. Inside, it was a cozy haven, mismatched antique furniture, shelves overflowing with books, and the constant, reassuring presence of the sea just beyond her garden gate. It was exactly what she'd yearned for, a place where the loudest sound was the cry of gulls, and the most pressing appointment was the turning of a page. Her new role as assistant librarian at the Oakhaven Public Library was a dream woven from old paper and quiet contemplation. The library itself was a treasure, a grand old Victorian building with tall arched windows, towering oak shelves, and the unmistakable scent of aged leather and forgotten stories. Each morning, Elara would walk the short distance from her cottage, a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder, the cobblestone streets echoing her soft footsteps. The town was still mostly asleep at that hour, save for the occasional fisherman heading out or the early risers at Mrs. Henderson's bakery, whose windows glowed with the promise of warm bread. She loved the hushed reverence of the library before opening hours. It was a sacred space, she thought, where countless voices whispered from the spines, waiting to be heard. Her tasks were simple but fulfilling: sorting new arrivals, shelving returns, carefully mending well-loved volumes, and arranging the display of local history books that always seemed to draw a crowd. Mrs. Gable, the head librarian, was a woman of ample bosoms and an even ampler heart, her silver hair perpetually escaping its neat bun, her spectacles perched precariously on her nose. She'd welcomed Elara with open arms and a bottomless pot of herbal tea, sharing tales of Oakhaven's eccentricities and charms over biscuits baked by her grandson. Elara found a quiet joy in these routines. She'd never been one for grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements. Her happiness resided in the subtle shifts of light through the library windows, the comforting weight of a well-worn book in her hands, the satisfied click of a puzzle piece falling into place. Here, in Oakhaven, she felt a sense of belonging that had eluded her in the bustling city. It was as if the town itself breathed with a gentle, understanding rhythm, matching her own. One blustery Tuesday morning, as she walked her usual path towards the library, the wind whipping strands of hair across her face, she noticed something new. Tucked away down a narrow lane that branched off towards the quieter part of the docks, stood a small, unassuming workshop. It was built of dark, weathered timber, its windows fogged with what looked like sawdust, and a faint, sweet scent of freshly cut wood mingled with the ubiquitous sea air. She'd passed this lane countless times, but her gaze had always been drawn to the boats in the harbor. Today, however, a peculiar glint of sunlight caught her eye, bouncing off a brass nameplate she hadn't noticed before. Thorn and Son, Boat Builders, and Fine Woodwork. Curiosity, a quiet but persistent companion, tugged at her. She slowed her pace, peering through the dusty panes. Inside, she could make out the silhouette of a man, tall and broad-shouldered, bent over a workbench. He moved with a practiced grace, his hands, even from this distance, appearing strong and capable. The rhythmic scrape of a plane against wood was faintly audible, a soothing, industrious sound that resonated with the quiet hum of Oakhaven. From that day on, the workshop became a subtle fixture on her morning walks. She never consciously diverted her path, but her eyes would invariably drift towards it, drawn by the scent of pine and cedar, the occasional glimpse of the man within. He was a creature of habit, it seemed, always there, always working, a steadfast presence in the ever-shifting coastal light. She never saw his face clearly, only his profile, his dark hair often falling across his brow as he concentrated. He seemed utterly absorbed in his craft, oblivious to the world outside his workshop. She found herself weaving quiet narratives around him. Was he carving intricate figureheads for grand ships, or shaping elegant oars for fishing boats? Did he hum old sea shanties as he worked, or did he prefer the quiet camaraderie of his tools? He was a silent, intriguing mystery. A shadow on the periphery of her new, peaceful life. She didn't know his name, only the inscription on the brass plate, and even then, she wasn't sure if he was Thorn or the sun. One particularly foggy Thursday, a week or so after first noticing the workshop, Ilara arrived at the library to find something unusual. On the worn stone step, just beside the ornate oak door, lay a small object. It was a piece of wood, no bigger than her palm, intricately carved into a complex, beautiful knot. A true lover's knot, she recognized, with interlocking loops and twists. The wood was a rich, dark cherry, polished to a soft sheen, and the craftsmanship was exquisite, each curve and angle perfect. It felt warm to the touch, as if recently handled. A faint scent of sawdust and something else, something subtly earthy and sweet, clung to it. Her mind immediately flew to the workshop. It had to be from there. But why was it here? Had someone dropped it? Was it a gift, or simply lost? She turned it over in her hands, admiring the artistry, a strange sense of wonder blossoming in her chest. It felt like a whisper, a silent message left just for her, though she couldn't fathom its meaning. She took it inside, placing it carefully on her desk, admiring its quiet beauty. Throughout the day, her gaze kept returning to it. It was so perfectly made, so delicate, yet strong. The man in the workshop, whoever he was, possessed a remarkable talent. The knot became her silent companion, a tangible link to the mysterious craftsman. She imagined him creating it, his strong hands guiding the chisel, his brow furrowed in concentration. It was a peculiar feeling, this fascination with a man she'd never spoken to, a man whose face she hadn't even truly seen. But the knot, she felt, told a story of patience, skill, and a quiet passion. A few days later, the library's old sign, a hand-painted wooden plaque that had graced the entrance for decades, finally gave up the ghost. One of the supporting chains snapped with a dramatic clang, sending one side of the sign swinging precariously, threatening to crash to the ground. Mrs. Gable, flustered and wringing her hands, declared it an emergency. "Oh dear, oh dear. My grandfather painted that sign, you know. We simply can't lose it," she fretted, peering over her spectacles. "It needs a proper repair, something sturdy, something lasting, not just a quick fix." Ilara, ever practical, suggested, "Perhaps a local carpenter?" Mrs. Gable brightened. "Precisely, and I know just the man. Elias Thorne. His family has been in Oakhaven for generations, building boats and mending what needs mending. He's the best craftsman in town, bar none. A bit quiet, perhaps, but his work speaks for itself. He's got that workshop down by the docks, you know." Ilara's breath caught. Elias Thorne. The name clicked into place. The workshop. The strong, focused silhouette. The carved wooden knot on her desk. A sudden, gentle flutter of nerves stirred in her stomach. So his name was Elias. "I'll call him," Mrs. Gable announced, already reaching for the battered phone book. "He's always busy, but for the library, I'm sure he'll make time." Ilara watched her dial, a strange mix of anticipation and trepidation bubbling within her. She was about to meet the silent craftsman. A few minutes later, Mrs. Gable hung up, a satisfied smile on her face. "He'll be by tomorrow morning just after we open. Says he'll take a look at it and tell us what's needed. Such a reliable man, Elias." The rest of the day passed in a haze for Ilara. She found herself rearranging the same shelf of biographies 3 times, her mind replaying the conversation, her gaze drawn to the cherry wood knot still resting on her desk. What would he be like? Would he be as quiet in person as he seemed from a distance? Would he notice the knot? Her heart did a peculiar little dance at the thought. The next morning, Ilara arrived at the library earlier than usual. She tidied her desk, ran a duster over the antique card catalog, and even straightened the spines of the poetry collection with an unusual fervor. Mrs. Gable, noticing her subtle jitters, merely chuckled. "Excited to meet our Elias, dear. He's quite the fixture in Oakhaven, though he mostly keeps to himself and his wood." Just after 10 o'clock, the heavy oak door creaked open, admitting a gust of crisp autumn air and the man himself. Elias Thorne. He was taller than she'd imagined, his presence filling the space with an understated strength. He wore dark, practical work trousers and a thick woolen jumper, the sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. His hands, she noticed immediately, were exactly as she'd pictured, large, calloused, but with an inherent grace that hinted at their skill. Poem. His hair was dark, almost black, a few strands falling across his forehead, just as she'd seen from the workshop window. His eyes, when they met hers, were a startling shade of deep blue, framed by dark lashes, and held a quiet intensity that was both unnerving and captivating. He carried a worn leather toolbox in one hand, the other tucked into his pocket. A faint, familiar scent of sawdust and something deeper, like sea salt and old leather, clung to him, a comforting, earthy aroma. "Morning, Mrs. Gable," he said, his voice a low rumble, deeper than she'd expected. It was a voice that seemed to vibrate with a quiet strength, like a cello string. "You called about the sign?" "Elias, dear, so glad you could make it." Mrs. Gable bustled forward, extending a hand. "This is Alara, our new assistant librarian. Alara, this is Elias Thorne." He turned to Alara, and for the first time, their eyes truly met. A flicker of something unreadable passed through his blue gaze, a brief moment of connection before he offered a polite, almost shy nod. "Miss Alara." "Mr. Thorne," she managed, her voice a little breathy, a warmth spreading through her cheeks. Up close he was even more striking than her distant observations had suggested. There was a rugged handsomeness about him, a quiet strength that emanated from his very being. He didn't linger on pleasantries, his gaze already drifting towards the offending sign, which still dangled precariously. "Let's have a look at that, shall we?" he murmured, his attention already absorbed by the task at hand. He moved with an efficient grace, pulling a small ladder from his toolbox and setting it up with practiced ease. Alara watched him, fascinated as he climbed, his muscles flexing beneath the wool of his jumper. He examined the broken chain, his brow furrowed in concentration, his strong fingers delicately tracing the damage. "Hey, the old chain's rusted through," he finally announced, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet library. "And the wood around it has seen better days. Best to take it down, give it a proper clean, and replace the fittings entirely. I'll need to reinforce the wood too." "Whatever you think best, Elias," Mrs. Gable said, ever trusting. "As long as it's safe and sound." He nodded, already descending the ladder. "I'll need to take it back to the workshop. It'll be a couple of days, maybe 3, depending on how stubborn the old wood is." Alara felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of him leaving so soon, then immediately chided herself. He was here for work, not conversation. He gathered his tools, his movements economical and precise. As he walked past Alara's desk, his gaze flickered, almost imperceptibly, to the cherry wood knot. He paused for the briefest moment, his eyes lingering on it, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Then, just as quickly, the expression vanished, and he continued on his way. "I'll be back with a stronger chain," he said to Mrs. Gable, already at the door, the heavy sign tucked under one arm. He didn't look back at Alara. And then he was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of wood and sea, and a quiet hum in the air that seemed to vibrate with unspoken possibilities. Alara found herself staring at the empty doorway, a strange mixture of relief and yearning swirling within her. He was exactly as she'd imagined, and yet so much more. The quiet craftsman, Elias Thorne. And he had noticed the knot. She picked it up, tracing its intricate curves with her finger, a warmth spreading through her. The air in the library felt different now, charged with a subtle anticipation. The whispers of Oakhaven, she realized, had just become a little louder, hinting at stories yet to unfold. She picked it up, tracing its intricate curves with her finger, a warmth spreading through her. The air in the library felt different now, charged with a subtle anticipation. The whispers of Oakhaven, she realized, had just become a little louder, hinting at stories yet to unfold. Alara walked slowly back to her apartment above the library, the knot held carefully in her palm. The warmth from the wood seemed to seep into her skin, a comforting weight. She didn't turn on the lights immediately, letting the fading twilight paint the room in soft hues of lavender and gray. The silence of the empty library below her felt different now, no longer vast and echoing, but humming with a quiet promise. She sat by the window, the knot resting on the sill, its silhouette dark against the deepening sky. Elias Thorne. The name itself felt like a gentle melody on her tongue. He hadn't been just the quiet craftsman from the village stories. He was a presence, a quiet intensity in his eyes that had seen the knot, truly seen it, and perhaps, in a fleeting moment, had seen something in her too. He'd noticed the knot. The simple words had resonated with an unexpected depth. How many times had she shown it to people, only for it to be dismissed as just another old trinket? But Elias had understood, or at least recognized its unique significance. Her librarian's heart, ever curious, began to stir. This knot wasn't just a pretty object. It was a thread, an unspoken question. She'd always loved the way stories unfolded, layer by layer, revealing hidden truths. And now, she felt a story beginning to unfurl around her, right here in Oakhaven. A story intricately tied to this small wooden marvel. The next morning, Alara found herself drawn to the library's archives, a section usually reserved for the most dusty and forgotten tomes of Oakhaven's past. She pulled out local histories, old gazetteers, and even a collection of village folklore. Her fingers danced over the pages, searching for any mention of unique wooden knots, specific symbols, or even unusual local crafts. The knot sat on her desk, a silent companion, as she delved into the faded ink and yellowed parchment. She learned about Oakhaven's founding families, its early industries, logging, weaving, boat building. She discovered tales of ancient trees believed to hold the village's spirit, and old superstitions about knots being used for protection, for memory, or for binding wishes. Nothing specific to her knot, not yet, but the pieces felt like they were gathering, forming a mosaic she couldn't quite decipher. Amidst her research, she caught herself pausing, her gaze drifting to the library's large front windows. She found herself subconsciously scanning the street, a faint hope stirring within her that Elias might pass by, perhaps on his way to the general store, or simply taking a stroll. He didn't, but the quiet expectation was a new, pleasant sensation. Later that afternoon, a familiar scent drifted through the library's open windows, the rich, yeasty aroma of fresh bread from Mrs. Gable's bakery, just across the square. It was a ritual now, her afternoon visit for a warm scone and a cup of tea. As she stepped out, the sunlight was a gentle caress on her face, and the village square was bustling with a quiet rhythm. Children played near the old oak tree in the center, their laughter like bells. Villagers chatted on benches, their voices a soft murmur. Oakhaven was not just a collection of buildings. It was a living, breathing entity, full of warmth and understated charm. Inside the bakery, Mrs. Gable, a woman with flour-dusted hands and a perpetually kind smile, greeted her. "Afternoon, Alara. The usual?" "Please, Mrs. Gable," Alara replied, her eyes scanning the array of golden-brown pastries. "Heard you had a visitor yesterday," Mrs. Gable said, her eyes twinkling as she wrapped a scone. "Elias Thorne, wasn't it? Came for some books, I imagine." Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. The whispers of Oakhaven indeed. "He did," she confirmed, trying to sound casual. "He was looking for something specific." Mrs. Gable nodded knowingly. "Elias is a good man. Quiet, of course, but his hands. There's magic in his hands, Alara. He can make wood sing. His grandfather, old Silas Thorne, was the same, a true master craftsman. The Thorne family have been here for generations, always working with wood, always making beautiful things." She leaned in conspiratorially. "They say the Thorns can see the stories in the grain of a tree, that they understand the language of the forest." Alara's heart fluttered. The language of the foresting dot. The knot, her knot, was made of wood. And Elias had noticed it. A new layer to the mystery, a new connection. "That's fascinating, Mrs. Gable," she said, genuinely intrigued. "I've been trying to learn more about Oakhaven's history and its crafts." "Well, you've come to the right place," Mrs. Gable chuckled, handing her the scone and tea. "Oakhaven has more stories than you can find in any book, dear. You just have to listen." Alara carried her treats back to the library, the warmth of the scone echoing the warmth in her chest. Mrs. Gable's words had added texture to the whispers. Elias and his family, their deep connection to wood, their history in Oakhaven. It all pointed back to the knot, to the subtle energy she felt emanating from it. The next few days settled into a comfortable routine of library work and quiet research. Alara found herself looking forward to the evenings, when she could pore over old maps and faded sketches, seeking patterns, seeking answers. She sketched the knot repeatedly in her notebook, trying to capture its perfect symmetry, its unique interlocking design. She tried to imagine the hands that had carved it, the story it might tell. One crisp autumn afternoon, as leaves began to turn fiery reds and oranges, Ilara was sorting through a donation of old books from the formidable Miss Agatha Finch, a meticulous woman known for her family's extensive history in Oakhaven. Among the dusty boxes, Ilara found a small leather-bound volume, much older than the others. Its title was simply Oakhaven Lore and Legends, and it smelled of forgotten attics and dried herbs. Flipping through its brittle pages, Ilara discovered charming tales of the village's founding, of the spirits of the old oak tree, and of the river that wound through the valley. And then she saw it. A faded, hand-drawn illustration. It wasn't an exact match for her knot, but it was strikingly similar, a complex interwoven design labeled the Knot of Ever-Woven Hearts. The accompanying text spoke of a legend, a symbol of enduring love and unity, traditionally carved from the wood of the ancient Oakhaven oak and given between two people whose destinies were intertwined, meant to bind their souls together through time. It was said to only reveal its true meaning when held by one who recognized its purpose. Ilara's breath hitched. A knot of ever-woven hearts ganged. Her knot. A symbol of enduring love, of intertwined destinies. She looked from the illustration to the knot resting on her desk, then back again. A shiver ran down her spine, not of cold, but of profound recognition. The warmth she felt when holding it, the subtle charge in the air, it wasn't just old wood. It was imbued with something deeper, something magical. She longed to share this discovery, to discuss its implications with someone who understood. And the only person who had truly seen the knot was Elias. A few days later, fate, or perhaps the subtle magic of Oakhaven, intervened. Ilara was out, running an errand for the library, picking up custom-made shelving from a local carpenter in a neighboring village. As she drove back into Oakhaven, she noticed a small hand-painted sign she hadn't paid much attention to before. Thorn Woodcraft, Custom Designs and Repairs. It was tucked away on a quiet lane just off the main square, nestled between an old stone wall and a sprawling rose garden. A sudden, irresistible urge pulled her car down the lane. She parked and stepped out, the scent of sawdust and fresh wood filling the air. The workshop was a charming, weathered building, its windowsills adorned with potted herbs. Through the open door, she could hear the gentle rhythmic tap of a hammer, the soft rasp of sandpaper. Taking a deep breath, Ilara walked towards the entrance. She hesitated for a moment, then gently pushed the door open further. Inside, Elias Thorne was exactly as she remembered, and yet somehow more vibrant in his own element. He was bent over a workbench, his brow furrowed in concentration, his strong, capable hands moving with practiced grace over a piece of uncarved wood. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through a dusty window, illuminating the fine motes of sawdust dancing in the air, and casting a warm glow on his dark hair and the intricate patterns of the wood he was shaping. He wore a simple flour-dusted apron, and his sleeves were rolled up, revealing sinewy forearms. He looked up at the sound of her entrance, his eyes, the color of rich earth, widening slightly in surprise. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly warm amidst the quiet hum of the workshop. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Ilara felt her cheeks flush. "Elias," she replied, trying to sound composed. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I was just passing by. Well, I had a question. And perhaps a discovery." She gestured vaguely towards her bag, where the book of Oakhaven Lore and Legends lay. He straightened up, brushing sawdust from his apron. "Never an interruption when it comes to discoveries, especially from the library." He gestured to a worn but comfortable wooden stool near a clean workbench. "Can I offer you a cup of tea? I've just put the kettle on." "That would be lovely, thank you," Ilara said, taking a seat, her gaze sweeping around the workshop. It was a haven of craftsmanship. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, finished pieces gleamed on shelves, and the rich scent of various woods filled the air. There was a sense of order, of quiet dedication that resonated deeply with her own love for the organized shelves of the library. As Elias moved to a small, cluttered corner with a kettle and mismatched mugs, Ilara noticed the pieces he was working on. Intricate carvings, delicate joinery, the careful shaping of wood into beautiful, functional objects. He truly did make wood sing. He handed her a steaming mug of herbal tea, its aroma fragrant with mint. "So, a discovery," he prompted, settling onto a stool opposite her, his hands clasped around his own mug. His eyes held a gentle curiosity, a quiet invitation to share. Alara took a sip, the warm liquid comforting her. Yes, it's about the knot. She reached into her bag and carefully extracted the small leather-bound book. I've been doing some research ever since you recognized it. A flicker of something, understanding, perhaps a touch of knowing, crossed his face. I remember it well, he said softly. It's a remarkable piece. It is, Alara agreed, opening the book to the page with the illustration. And I think I found something that sheds a little light on its history. She showed him the faded drawing. This is from an old book of Oakhaven lore. It calls it The Knot of Ever-Woven Hearts. Elias leaned closer, his gaze fixed on the illustration. He traced the lines with a calloused finger, his expression unreadable, but a quiet intensity radiating from him. The knot of ever-woven hearts, he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. I've heard that name before in passing. Old village tales. My grandmother used to tell them. He looked up at Alara, his eyes meeting hers, a shared spark of recognition passing between them. It's said to be a powerful symbol, very old magic, steeped in Oakhaven's very foundations. The book describes it as a symbol of enduring love and unity, Alara explained, her voice gaining a quiet passion. Carved from the wood of the ancient Oakhaven oak, and given between two people whose destinies are intertwined, meant to bind their souls together through time. She paused, a little breathless. It even says it only reveals its true meaning when held by one who recognizes its purpose. Elias listened intently, his gaze unwavering. That aligns with what little I know. My family, the Thorns, we've always been woodworkers here in Oakhaven. We've always had a reverence for the old oak, and we've always been sensitive to the stories held within the wood itself. He took a slow breath. My grandfather, Silas, he had a particular fascination with the old symbols, the ones that predate even the village's formal founding. He spoke of a time when such knots were not just decorative, but carried a deep spiritual weight, a promise, a connection that went beyond words. Alara felt a thrill run through her. This was it. The deeper meaning. The connection she'd been yearning for. So, you think my knot, it could be one of Itetho's knots. Elias reached over, his fingers gently touching the illustration again. From what I see here, and from what I remember of yours, yes, it has the hallmarks of true Oakhaven craftsmanship, from the time when the old ways were still strong. The specific interlocking pattern, the subtle flow of the lines, it's not just skill, it's understanding. The woodworker knew its purpose, understood the weight of the promise it represented. He looked at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. Where did you find it, if you don't mind me asking? It was passed down in my family, Alara replied, a wistful note in her voice. My great-grandmother, I believe. She always said it was a family heirloom, but never really explained its history, just that it was special. Special indeed, Elias murmured, his gaze distant as if seeing through time. To have kept its meaning hidden for so long, and now, for you to bring it here, to Oakhaven, and to uncover its story. He shook his head slightly, a small, wondering smile playing on his lips. It feels like the village itself is waking up to something. The phrase struck Alara deeply. The village itself is waking up. The whispers. They weren't just gossip. They were the collective memory of Oakhaven, stirring. I confess, Alara said, her voice softer, more vulnerable. I felt a strange pull towards Oakhaven since I arrived, like I was meant to be here. And then the knot. And now this. She gestured to the book. It feels like it's all connected. Elias nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers again, holding her gaze with an unusual intensity. Perhaps it is. Oakhaven has a way of drawing people in, especially those who are meant to be here. And the knot. It might be more than just a symbol of past connections. It might be a key to future ones. The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. A warmth spread through Alara, a comforting heat that had nothing to do with the tea. She felt a profound sense of rightness, of finally being in the place she was meant to be, with someone who understood the quiet magic she sensed. I'd like to learn more, Alara said, her voice barely a whisper. About these old symbols, about the Thorn family's history with them, about the ancient oak. Elias's smile widened, a genuine, heartwarming expression that softened the usual quiet intensity in his eyes. I'd be happy to share what I know. My grandfather left behind a lot of journals, sketches. He was obsessed with preserving the old ways. Perhaps together, we could piece more of it together. He paused, then added, and maybe together, we could find out what else the knot has to say. Elara felt a leap in her chest. Togethering.ice. The word resonated with a sweet promise. I'd like that very much, Elias. They sat for a while longer, sipping their tea, talking not just about the knot, but about the quiet charm of Oakhaven, the changing seasons, the simple joys of their crafts. Elias spoke of the challenge of finding the perfect piece of wood, of coaxing out its hidden beauty. Elara spoke of the satisfaction of finding the right book for a patron, of unlocking a forgotten story. They found common ground in their shared love for detail, for the quiet dedication to their passions. As the sun began its descent, casting long golden shadows across the workshop floor, Elara knew it was time to go. She felt lighter, fuller, than she had in a long time. The knot, the book, Elias, they were all weaving together, creating a tapestry of discovery and connection. Thank you, Elias, she said, rising from the stool. Good. For the tea, and for sharing your knowledge. This has been truly enlightening. The pleasure was all mine, Elara, he replied, rising with her. He walked her to the door, the scent of wood accompanying them. He paused at the threshold, his gaze lingering on her. I look forward to our next delve into Oakhaven's whispers. His words, simple as they were, held an unspoken warmth, a gentle invitation. Elara smiled, a genuine radiant smile that reached her eyes. So do I, Elias, so do I. She walked back to her car, the little leather-bound book tucked safely in her bag, and the image of Elias, surrounded by his beautiful wooden creations, burned brightly in her mind. The knot, she realized, was more than just an old family heirloom. It was a catalyst, a bridge, pulling her deeper into the heart of Oakhaven, and closer to the quiet craftsman who understood its magic. The whispers were no longer just hints. They were beginning to form a clear, beautiful melody, and Elara found herself eagerly anticipating every note. Elara walked back to the cottage, the afternoon sun dappling through the ancient oak trees that lined the lane, painting shifting patterns of light and shadow on the path ahead. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine, a comforting aroma that felt intrinsically Oakhaven. She clutched her bag, feeling the reassuring weight of the leather-bound book and the small, smooth knot within. Elias's words, his quiet confidence, and the genuine warmth in his eyes replayed in her mind, a soothing rhythm against the hum of the forest. Once inside her cozy cottage, Elara wasted no time. She placed the book gently on the scarred wooden table in her living room, a piece she'd found in an antique shop and lovingly restored. The knot, she set beside it, a dark, intricate enigma. She ran her fingers over its carved surface, tracing the twists and turns, feeling a subtle warmth emanating from the wood. It wasn't just old, it felt alive, imbued with a history that resonated deep within her. Opening the book, Elara was met with the elegant script she'd seen before. The first few pages were a family tree, detailing her lineage back several generations, all rooted in Oakhaven. It was a revelation, a connection she hadn't known she possessed. Her great-grandmother, a woman named Linnea, was listed as the last owner of the knot. Beneath her name, in a slightly different hand, was a brief, almost poetic entry. Keeper of the Oak Heart. Guide the whispers, may the true path be illuminated. Elara's breath hitched. Keeper of the Oak Heart. Guide of the whispers. It echoed what Elias had said, confirming his intuitive understanding. She turned the page, and the script shifted again, becoming more informal, like journal entries. These were Linnea's words, dated decades ago. The whispers grow louder with each passing year, a song only the heart can truly hear. They speak of balance, of connection, of the forest's soul intertwined with ours. The knot, my mother always said, is the key. It opens doors not just to forgotten paths, but to forgotten truths within ourselves. Elara continued to read, her eyes devouring Linnea's observations. Linnea wrote about the knot's power to reveal hidden meanings in nature, to guide her through the ancient woods, and even, subtly, to influence interactions with people. She described a time when a dispute between two Oakhaven families was resolved after she, guided by the knot's gentle pull, brought them together under the oldest oak in the clearing, where they found common ground and forgiveness. The knot does not command, Linnea had written. It suggests. It nudges. It shows you the way to listen to what already exists, to bring harmony where there is discord. It's a silent, wooden heart, beating in rhythm with Oakhaven itself. Beating in rhythm with Oakhaven itself. As Alara read, she noticed faint, almost invisible sketches tucked between the pages, delicate drawings of leaves, acorns, and sometimes a stylized image of the knot itself. There were also sketches of what looked like specific trees, ancient and gnarled, each with a unique character. One sketch in particular caught her eye, a grand, sprawling oak with a hollow in its trunk and a small, almost hidden carving near its base. She looked from the book to the knot, then back again. The knot, in Linnea's entries, was not just an heirloom, it was a living guide. And Linnea had been a guide of the whispers. Could Alara be too? The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the cottage windows in hues of orange and purple. Alara realized hours had passed. Her stomach rumbled, but the intellectual feast she'd just consumed felt far more satisfying. She carefully closed the book, placing the knot back on top. A profound sense of purpose settled over her, a quiet understanding that her arrival in Oakhaven, far from being random, was part of a larger, unfolding narrative. She cooked a simple dinner, her mind buzzing with newfound information. The whispers felt less like abstract suggestions now, and more like a gentle hum, a quiet invitation to explore, to listen, to connect. And at the heart of this connection was Elias, the man who seemed to instinctively understand the knot's significance, whose hands crafted beauty from the very wood that held Oakhaven's secrets. The next morning, Alara woke with a renewed sense of energy. The cottage, once just a temporary refuge, now felt like a launching pad. She spent the morning unpacking the last of her boxes, arranging her art supplies, tubes of paint, canvases, sketchbooks, in a small sunlit corner that overlooked the garden. She was a painter, a landscape artist, drawn to the raw beauty of nature. Oakhaven, with its ancient trees and hidden glades, was a muse she hadn't even known she was searching for. After a light lunch, Alara decided it was time to truly explore the town. She tucked the knot into her pocket, a small, comforting weight. Linnea's words about the knot guiding her through the woods resonated, and Alara felt an urge to see where it might lead her. Oakhaven's main street was quaint and charming. A general store with a creaky porch, a bakery whose scent of warm bread wafted enticingly, a small library, and a few artisanal shops. Alara ambled along, soaking in the atmosphere, observing the slow, deliberate pace of life. People nodded greetings, their smiles warm and welcoming, making her feel less like a stranger and more like someone who belonged. As she passed the bakery, the aroma of cinnamon and apples proved irresistible. She stepped inside, the little bell above the door jingling cheerily. The air was thick with delicious smells, and a kindly-faced woman with flour dusted on her apron smiled from behind the counter. "Welcome, dear," the woman said. "New to Oakhaven, aren't you? I'm Martha, best apple pie in 3 counties if I do say so myself." Alara smiled. "Alara. And it smells incredible. I'll take a slice of that pie, please." As Martha wrapped the pie, she chatted easily. "Heard you bought the old Willow Creek cottage. Lovely place, though a bit quiet, some might say. My sister used to own it before she moved closer to her grandbabies." "It's perfect," Alara said, feeling a surge of warmth. "I'm an artist, and the light there is wonderful." "An artist, you say? Well, Oakhaven certainly has its share of beauty to inspire you. Maybe you'll even find a way to capture the spirit of our oldest trees. They say they have stories to tell." Martha winked. Alara felt a gentle nudge from the knot in her pocket. "I tell you, all the oldest trees. I'd love to," she said genuinely. "I've already been captivated by them." Just then, the bell above the door jingled again, and in walked Elias. He was carrying a small, intricately carved wooden box, its surface gleaming. He looked up, his gaze sweeping over the small shop, and his eyes met Alara's. A slow, easy smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes. "Alara," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent a pleasant shiver down her spine. "What a surprise." "Elias," she replied, her heart doing a little flutter kick. "I was just exploring the town. and Martha's pie was calling my name. He chuckled, a rich, warm sound. Martha's pies are legendary. I'm just dropping off a commission for Mrs. Henderson, a keepsake box for her granddaughter. He held up the wooden box, and Elara admired the delicate knotwork carved into its lid. It's beautiful, she said, her artist's eye appreciating the craftsmanship. Your work is truly remarkable. Thank you, he said, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. It's just wood. But it speaks to me. He paused, then his gaze softened. Did you look at the book? Elara nodded, her excitement bubbling over. I did. For hours. It's extraordinary, Elias. My great-grandmother Linnea was the last owner. She wrote about the knot, about the whispers, and she called it the oak heart. Elias's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of deep understanding passing between them. The oak heart, he repeated, almost reverently. I knew it. I felt it. The wood. It sings differently in your presence, Elara. Martha, having finished serving another customer, turned to them, a knowing look on her face. Sounds like you two were discussing something important. Don't mind me, just the nosy baker. Elias smiled at Martha. Just talking about some old Oakhaven history, Martha. Elara's family has a deep connection to this town. Oh, I gathered as much, Martha said, patting Elara's hand as she handed over her pie. Well, you two enjoy your history, and come back any time, Elara. As they stepped out of the bakery, the scent of fresh bread clinging to their clothes, Elias turned to Elara. So, the oak heart. What else did you learn? Linnea wrote about it guiding her, Elara explained, walking beside him down the street. Through the woods, to solve disputes, to listen to the whispers. She sketched specific trees, too. Ancient ones. One with a hollow and a carving near its base. Elias stopped, his expression thoughtful. A hollow and a carving? That sounds like the elder oak. It's in the old part of the forest, beyond the usual hiking trails. There are stories about it being a place of reflection, even a sort of natural shrine for the town's founders. Do you think the carving is still there? Elara asked, a thrill of anticipation running through her. It might be, Elias said slowly, his gaze drifting towards the distant tree line. It's not a place many people go anymore. The path is overgrown. He looked at her, a question in his eyes. Are you thinking of finding it? I am, Elara admitted, her hand instinctively going to the knot in her pocket. Linnea's words felt like an invitation. And the knot, it feels like it's pulling me towards something. Elias considered her for a moment, then a soft smile touched his lips. I know the way. If you'd like some company and a guide through the more challenging parts of the path, I'd be happy to take you. Tomorrow morning, perhaps? Elara's heart leaped. I'd love that, Elias. Thank you. The thought of spending more time with him exploring the heart of Oakhaven made the prospect of finding the elder oak even more enticing. Great, he said, his smile widening. Meet me at the edge of the old logging road, just past the mill, at 9. Wear sturdy shoes. They parted ways, Elara with her delicious pie and a lighter step, Elias heading off to deliver his wooden box. The melody of the whispers was growing clearer still, a duet now, harmonizing with Elias's quiet strength. The next morning, Elara was ready. She wore sturdy hiking boots, practical trousers, and a light jacket. She had packed water, a few snacks, and of course the knot was nestled securely in her pocket. Her sketchbook and a small set of pencils were tucked into her backpack. She felt a surge of excitement, a sense of adventure she hadn't experienced in years. She met Elias at the designated spot. He was already there, leaning against his old pickup truck, dressed in practical work clothes, a canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked comfortable, at home in the wilderness, and undeniably handsome in the morning light. Good morning, Elara, he greeted, his smile warm. Ready for an adventure? More than ready, she replied, feeling a flush of warmth spread through her. They set off, walking along a wide gravel path that soon narrowed into a dirt trail, then an overgrown track. The air grew cooler, the sunlight filtering through the dense canopy of trees in dappled patterns. Elias walked with a quiet confidence, his movements fluid and strong. He pointed out different trees, identifying them by their leaves and bark, sharing snippets of Oakhaven lore connected to each. This old growth here, he said, gesturing to a towering fir. They say it remembers everything that happens beneath its branches. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes of stories. Alara smiled, pressing her hand to the knot in her pocket. I think I might be starting to hear them. As they delved deeper into the woods, the path became less distinct. Elias led the way, occasionally using a small hand axe to clear a stubborn branch or pointing out a hidden root. Alara found herself enchanted by the forest, its ancient quiet, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of unseen birds. It was a symphony of nature, and she felt completely at peace. They talked easily, their conversation flowing naturally from the forest to their lives. Alara spoke about her art, her love for capturing light and shadow, the way a landscape could tell a story without words. Elias listened intently, his eyes fixed on her, making her feel truly seen. I've always loved the way wood tells a story, he said, turning a smooth, fallen branch over in his hands. Each grain, each knot. It's a record of its life. A tree lives for decades, centuries. It stands witness to so much. My job, I think, is to coax that story out, to let its spirit shine through in something new. That's beautiful, Elias, Alara said softly. It's more than just craftsmanship. It's a conversation with nature. He met her gaze, a deep understanding passing between them. Exactly. And you, with your painting, you do the same, don't you? You capture the essence of a moment, a place, and share its story. They continued walking, the woods growing wilder, more ancient. Alara felt the knot in her pocket growing warmer, vibrating with a subtle energy. The whispers, faint at first, began to coalesce into a clear, insistent pull, guiding her forward. I think we're close, Alara said, following the subtle guidance. I feel it. Elias nodded, his own senses attuned to the forest. The air feels different here. Older. They soon emerged into a small clearing, dominated by a single colossal oak tree. It was truly ancient, its trunk wider than Alara could imagine, its branches reaching out like gnarled, powerful arms, heavy with centuries of wisdom. A large hollow near its base seemed to beckon, a dark, inviting maw. The elder oak, Elias breathed, his voice hushed with reverence. Alara walked towards it, her heart pounding with anticipation. She circled the massive trunk, her fingers trailing over the rough, furrowed bark. And then she saw it. Just as Linnea had sketched, near the base of the tree, subtly hidden by lichen and time, was a small, intricate carving. It was a stylized representation of the knot, encircled by what looked like an unfurling leaf. It's here, Alara whispered, a thrill of discovery coursing through her. She pulled the knot from her pocket. It felt almost hot now, humming with energy. As she held it up, aligning it with the carving, a faint light seemed to shimmer around the knot in her hand, mirroring the ancient image on the tree. Elias knelt beside her, his gaze fixed on the knot and the carving. Incredible, he murmured. It's like it's recognizing itself. As they gazed at the carving, Alara noticed something else. A faint inscription beneath it, barely legible. She brushed away some moss, and Elias leaned closer, his broad shoulder brushing hers, sending a jolt of electricity through her. Together, they deciphered the old script. Where Oakheart meets Elder, the path to the forgotten spring shall be revealed. A gift for those who listen, a balm for Oakhaven's spirit. Yeah. The forgotten spring, Alara repeated, her mind racing. Linnea hadn't mentioned a spring in her journal, but the whispers now felt clearer than ever. A cool, refreshing sensation. A gift for Oakhaven's spirit. What could that mean? Elias stood, his eyes scanning the clearing. Oakhaven relies on its waterways. There's the Willow Creek, of course, but an additional spring. That could be a significant resource, especially in drier years. And if it's been forgotten, it might need tending. He walked around the clearing, his eyes on the ground, on the subtle shifts in vegetation. Alara, holding the knot, felt a distinct pull towards a patch of dense undergrowth near the edge of the clearing, where the ground sloped downwards. Over here, Elias, she called out, her voice filled with conviction. The knot is pulling me this way. He joined her, and together they pushed through the thick bushes. The ground became softer, damper, and the air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of fresh water. They found a narrow, overgrown path, almost completely reclaimed by nature. This must be it, Elias said, his voice laced with wonder. This path leads down to a ravine. There's a small stream down there, but I've never heard of a spring. They followed the barely discernible trail, the knot in Alara's hand glowing faintly, guiding their steps. After a few minutes of careful descent, they reached a secluded, moss-covered grotto. Water trickled down a stone face, collecting in a small, crystal-clear pool before flowing into a narrow stream. The air was cool and serene, filled with the gentle sound of flowing water. It was a place of astonishing beauty, hidden away, untouched. The forgotten spring, Alara breathed, awestruck. The whispers here were no longer just a melody. They were a gentle, soothing chorus, singing of peace and renewal. Elias knelt beside the pool, dipping his fingers into the water. "It's so pure," he murmured, bringing his wet fingers to his lips. "And cold. This is an incredible find, Alara. This could be vital for Oakhaven." As they sat there, absorbing the tranquility of the grotto, Alara pulled out her sketchbook. The light, the water, the ancient stones, it all called to her. She began to sketch, her pencil flying across the page, capturing the delicate flow of the water, the texture of the moss, the serene beauty of the hidden spring. Elias watched her, a soft smile on his face. "You're truly in your element here, aren't you?" "Completely," she said, not looking up from her drawing. "It's like this place was waiting to be seen, to be remembered. And you were meant to find it," he added softly. "With the knot, and your great-grandmother's guidance." They spent a long time at the spring, Alara sketching, Elias simply observing, his presence a comforting warmth beside her. The intimacy of their shared discovery, the quiet understanding that grew between them, felt more profound than any grand gesture. They were explorers, uncoverers of Oakhaven's hidden heart, and in doing so, they were also uncovering parts of themselves. As they made their way back up the path, the sun was beginning its descent. The forest was bathed in a golden light, casting long shadows. Alara felt a deep sense of contentment, a feeling of belonging she hadn't thought possible. "We need to tell the town about this," Alara said, her voice filled with quiet excitement. "This spring, it feels special. It feels like a gift." "It is," Elias agreed. "But we should approach it carefully. The forest guards its secrets. We should talk to the town council, explain what we found and how. It'll take some convincing, but the benefits for Oakhaven could be immense." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a shared purpose. "It feels like a beginning, doesn't it?" Alara nodded, her heart swelling. "It does. A beautiful beginning." She thought of Linnea's words, a balm for Oakhaven's spirit. This spring wasn't just about water. It was about hope, about renewing a connection to the land, about bringing people together. As they reached the edge of the forest, near Elias's truck, the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in fiery hues. He turned to her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Thank you, Alara," he said, his voice soft. "For trusting the whispers, for bringing the knot back, for sharing this with me. It's profound." "Thank you, Ias," she replied, meeting his gaze. "For understanding, for guiding me, for being here. I wouldn't have found it without you." Their eyes held, a silent conversation passing between them, filled with unspoken gratitude and a burgeoning connection. The air around them seemed to shimmer with possibility. "Well," Elias said, breaking the spell gently, "I should get you back to your cottage. You must be tired." "A little," Alara admitted, though her energy felt limitless. But in the best possible way. The drive back was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with the echoes of their shared adventure. When they arrived at her cottage, Elias walked her to her door. "I'll speak to the town council tomorrow," he said. "Maybe you could join me? Your perspective and the story of the knot will be important." "I'd be honored," Alara said, her hand resting on the smooth wood of her door. "Thank you again, Elias." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her. "Good night, Alara." "Good night, Elias." She watched him walk back to his truck, the setting sun casting his silhouette in long, elegant lines. When he drove away, Alara stepped inside, her cottage feeling warmer, brighter than ever before. The knot, now resting on her table, seemed to pulse with a gentle, steady light. She looked at her sketches of the forgotten spring, already imagining the paintings she would create, bringing its hidden beauty to light. The whispers were no longer just hints. They were a clear, resonant song, a symphony of purpose and connection, guiding her deeper into the heart of Oakhaven, and closer to the quiet craftsman who understood its magic. And Alara, with a hopeful smile on her lips, found herself eagerly anticipating every note, every chord, of the beautiful melody that was just beginning to unfold. Alara wasted no time. The very next morning, armed with her easel, canvases, and a spectrum of paints, she trekked back to the forgotten spring. The air there was different, cooler, imbued with the scent of damp earth and unseen blossoms. She set up her station, the gurgling of the water a soothing rhythm against the rustle of leaves. As she mixed her first palette, a familiar presence settled nearby. Liam. Shaw. He wasn't intrusive, merely there, sitting on an ancient moss-covered log a little distance away, whittling a piece of wood with practiced ease. The faint scent of cedar followed him. He didn't speak, didn't comment, just offered a quiet nod when their eyes met, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. His presence wasn't a distraction. It was an anchor, grounding her, making her feel seen and understood in a way she hadn't experienced before. Days turned into a quiet, shared routine. Alara painted, sometimes for hours, lost in the delicate interplay of light and shadow on the water, the intricate patterns of moss on the stones, the vibrant green of new growth. Liam would come and go, sometimes bringing her a thermos of warm tea or a freshly baked scone from Mrs. Gable's bakery, always without a word, his offerings a silent testament to his care. When he did speak, it was often about the spring itself, the names of the wildflowers, the history of the ancient oak that guarded its entrance, or the way the light shifted at different times of day, revealing new secrets. These weren't just facts. They were observations steeped in affection, revealing a deep reverence for Oakhaven's natural world. "This particular fern," he murmured one afternoon, pointing with his carving knife to a delicate frond near the water's edge, "only blooms after a long winter like this one. It's a sign of enduring hope, I think." Alara looked from the fern to his face, a sudden warmth blossoming in her chest. His quiet words were like the whispers themselves, profound and comforting. "Hope," she repeated softly, adding a touch of emerald green to her canvas, her brushstrokes imbued with new understanding. Their conversations, though often sparse, grew richer in unspoken meaning. They spoke of the changing seasons, the quirks of the Oakhaven residents, and gradually, cautiously, of themselves. Alara told him about her restless spirit, her years of seeking a place where her art truly belonged, where the inspiration wasn't fleeting. Liam, in turn, shared glimpses of his life, a childhood spent roaming the woods, learning the language of wood and stone from his grandfather, a craftsman much like himself. He spoke of his contentment in Oakhaven, a sense of belonging that had always been his. "I never understood how people just knew where they belonged," Alara confessed one twilight evening, her canvas now a blur of deepening blues and purples. "I always felt like I was searching for a melody, but could only hear fragments." Liam paused his whittling, his gaze distant, fixed on the shimmering water. "Perhaps," he said, his voice a low rumble, "you were listening for the wrong kind of melody. Oakhaven's song isn't loud or grand. It's a quiet hum, a harmony woven into the earth, the trees, the whispers of the wind. You have to learn to listen with your heart, not just your ears." The whispers, Alara realized, were not just guiding her to places, but to people, to feelings, to an understanding of herself and the world around her. They were the melody Liam spoke of, and his presence helped her tune into its gentle frequency. As Alara's painting of the forgotten spring progressed, it began to transcend a mere landscape. It captured the vibrant life, the ancient wisdom, the quiet magic she felt emanating from the place. She found herself adding subtle, almost ethereal light to the water, a shimmering quality to the leaves, a sense of timelessness that spoke of the whispers themselves. It was the most honest, most deeply felt work she had ever created. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves began to turn fiery shades of red and gold, Alara knew the painting was complete. She stood back, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and profound emotion. It wasn't just a painting of a spring, it was a portrait of Oakhaven's soul, and a testament to the journey she had undertaken. Liam, who had been quietly observing, walked up to stand beside her. He didn't speak for a long moment, his eyes moving over the canvas, taking in every detail. Then, he reached out, his calloused finger gently tracing the edge of a painted fern, the same one he had pointed out weeks ago. "It's more than just paint and canvas, Ilara," he finally said, his voice soft, almost reverent. "You've captured the spirit of it, the whispers even." He turned to her, his gaze intense, revealing a depth of feeling that sent a tremor through her. "You hear them, don't you? The true song of this place." Ilara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I do, Liam, and I think you helped me learn how to listen." He reached out then, his hand gently cupping her cheek. His touch was warm, reassuring, a silent promise. "You were always listening, Ilara. You just needed to find the right harmony." His thumb brushed softly over her skin, and in his eyes she saw not just admiration for her art, but a tender, undeniable affection that mirrored her own. "And I think," Ilara whispered, leaning into his touch, her heart thrumming a new, joyous rhythm, "I think you are part of that harmony, Liam." His smile was slow, radiant, lighting up his usually reserved face. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was as gentle and profound as the whispers themselves. It was a kiss that tasted of pine and autumn air, of shared silences and unspoken understandings, a promise of a future woven from gentle moments and deep affection. Ilara decided to hold a small exhibition of her Oakhaven paintings at the town hall, a way to give back to the community that had embraced her. The Forgotten Spring painting, prominently displayed, was the centerpiece. When the doors opened, the townsfolk, curious and kind, filled the space. They marveled at her work, recognizing the familiar landscapes, but seeing them anew through Ilara's eyes, imbued with a magic they had perhaps forgotten or taken for granted. Mrs. Gable dabbed at her eyes, declaring the spring painting, "The most beautiful thing I've ever seen, dearie. You've truly captured Oakhaven's heart." Even Mr. Abernathy, usually gruff, nodded approvingly, a rare smile on his face. But it was Liam's reaction that mattered most to Ilara. He stood beside her, his hand finding hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a comforting, possessive grip. His quiet pride was palpable, a silent testament to their shared journey. The whispers, Ilara realized, were not just about finding inspiration for her art, or even about finding a place. They were about finding home in Oakhaven's ancient embrace and in Liam's steady, loving heart. She had spent so long searching for her purpose, for a place where she belonged, and here, in this quiet, unassuming town, she had found it all. As the evening drew to a close, and the last of the townsfolk departed, Ilara and Liam stood together in the quiet hall, bathed in the soft glow of the exhibition lights. The Forgotten Spring painting seemed to hum with a gentle energy, a testament to the beauty that lay hidden, waiting to be seen. "I think," Ilara said, turning to Liam, a hopeful smile gracing her lips, "I found my symphony after all." Liam pulled her close, wrapping her in a warm embrace. "And it's a beautiful one, Ilara," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "A beautiful, enduring melody. Welcome home." And in the comforting circle of his arms, with the whispers of Oakhaven echoing softly in her heart, Ilara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that she was finally, truly, home. The melody that had just begun to unfold was now a full, rich harmony, a lullaby of belonging and love, promising endless, beautiful tomorrows.